Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie begins in the 1920s, in rural Virginia. Desmond and Hal Doss, two brothers, enjoy themselves in the wilderness. Bertha, their sweet mother, who loves them unconditionally, lives with them. Meanwhile, their father, Tom, is going through a difficult time. He fought in World War I and lost many family members. As a result, he is now a completely different person. Desmond and Hal begin fighting one day, which is quite common between brothers at that age. But this time, things spiral out of control, and Tom has no intention of intervening. Desmond grabs a brick, and smacks Hal on the head. Bertha and Tom rush into the house with the unconscious child. Desmond, on the other hand, is terrified and unable to speak. He nearly killed his brother. Tom grabs his belt and prepares to teach him a lesson, but Bertha intervenes, claiming that it will only make the child more violent. Bertha approaches her son, and tells him that the greatest sin anyone can commit is murder. Bertha and Tom argue again that night. The two young boys are baffled as to why their father behaves in this manner. However, their mother informs Desmond, he developed this personality after the war. Most soldiers were forgotten after World War I. Even though they survived the horrors of war, they died in the minds of others. Desmond Doss works at the church, and helps his parents with chores after 15 years. A car collides with a man outside the church on any given day. Doss goes outside and applies pressure to the wound with his belt. He then transports the injured man to the hospital, where the doctor informs him that he saved the man's life. Doss meets Dorothy Shuda, a nurse, at the hospital. To get her attention, he offers to donate blood. He prepares to see her again the next day, overjoyed. He informs his parents that he has met a woman whom he wishes to marry. He visits the hospital and, using a couple of awkward pickup lines, persuades her to go to the movies. He unexpectedly kisses Dorothy on the lips after the movie, and the girl slaps him. She wasn't opposed to the kiss, but she wasn't expecting it. Hal appears at a family dinner dressed in a soldier's uniform. He enlisted in the army without informing his parents. His father is a World War I veteran, and the uniform reminds him of a fallen comrade in arms. Tom bursts into tears and tells Hal to leave him alone. Meanwhile, Doss and Dorothy develop a romance, and begin dating on a regular basis, spending entire afternoons together. He enlists in the army to serve as a combat medic, after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Dorothy is not pleased when he informs her of this news. Nonetheless, he asks for her hand in marriage before leaving, and she accepts with tears in her eyes. The decision has deeply troubled his father Tom. He is skeptical of Doss's abilities, and fears that he will not survive the war. He gets ready to leave for Fort Jackson the next day. Dorothy gives him her little Bible with a picture of her inside, and he kisses her passionately. Doss arrives at Fort Jackson later, and goes to the barracks with the other soldiers. During boot camp, the protagonist meets the other recruits, who appear to be friendly. Some people are outgoing, while others are more reserved. Some are taller and more muscular than others. When Sergeant Howell walks in, two soldiers are playing with a knife, and one of them gets the knife in his foot. Howell, like any sergeant, is extremely strict and will not hesitate to humiliate his recruits. The sergeant then orders the recruits to go outside, and learn how to tie strong knots. Then he puts them through an obstacle course, which Howell excels at and wins. Following that, the soldiers will be instructed on how to use the rifle. Sergeant Howell orders the soldiers to take their rifles, but one is missing. Doss explains that he was promised not to use the rifle or resort to violence. The sergeant takes him to the captain, who explains that the recruit will not touch the weapon due to religious beliefs. The captain becomes enraged, and orders him to be examined for mental abnormalities. Doss becomes an outcast among his fellow soldiers despite his abilities, because he refuses to handle a rifle and practice on Saturdays. He is mistreated in the barracks by recruit Smitty, because of his beliefs. Smitty suspects he is a coward rather than a religious man. He punches him in the face with his Bible. Nonetheless, Doss refuses to fight back. During his meeting with the psychiatrist, Doss persuades him that he is not insane, and that he truly believes in God. He is completely sane, according to the psychiatrist, because his religious beliefs do not constitute a mental illness. Because the protagonist cannot be demobilized under the law, the sergeant decides to make his life difficult for him. However, because the other soldiers in the barracks are subjected to the same punishments, they take it out on Doss. He is brutally beaten by the soldiers one morning. Sergeant Howell walks in and finds him covered in blood and bruises. The sergeant looks at him with displeasure and tells him to go home. Nonetheless, he refuses to give up, and refuses to identify the soldiers who abused him. Soon after, the soldiers complete their training, and are granted leave. However, the commander informs Doss that he will not grant it, until he demonstrates his proficiency with the rifle. When the soldier refuses to take the gun, he is charged with insubordination. He needed this release, because he was about to marry Dorothy. The girl was expecting him at the church, when she realized something serious had happened to her beloved Doss. Meanwhile, the protagonist is imprisoned and awaiting trial. Captain Glover tries to persuade Doss to confess his guilt and return home, but he refuses. Dorothy then enters the cell, and begs him to come home, but he cannot betray his faith. Dorothy later calls Doss's parents, and informs them that he has no intention of admitting guilt. His father then puts on his military uniform, and marches to the military court. Doss refuses to admit his guilt during the trial. Nonetheless, he states that he wishes to serve his country as a field doctor. Doss is accused of insubordination and must be punished, despite the fact that the judge shares his values. But just then, his father bursts in. During World War I, Tom was a sergeant who delivered an important letter to the court. A former commanding officer states in the letter, Doss's pacifism is protected by congressional law. Doss charges are dropped, and he is permitted to serve as a field doctor without carrying a weapon. Doss and Dorothy are able to marry after they are liberated. Doss' unit was eventually assigned to the 77th Infantry Division, and deployed to the Pacific Theater. On the way, the unit watches in disbelief as a convoy of dead and wounded soldiers passes by. 2 orderlies remain in Division 77, and advise Doss to remove his Red Cross, because the enemy first kills the doctors. The surviving soldiers are terrified, claiming that the Japanese soldiers have no plans to leave, and do not fear death. Doss' unit is informed during the Battle of Okinawa, it must relieve the 96th Infantry Division, which is tasked with climbing and securing Maida's escarpment, Hacksaw Ridge. They would take over Japan, and end the war once the escarpment was occupied. Before the infantry attack, artillery fires on the ridge. Many believe that this was sufficient to neutralize the enemy, but those who have been up there before are skeptical. Soldiers begin to ascend and advance among the bodies. At one point, an apparently dead soldier awakens and begins screaming, drawing the Japanese's attention. The enemy opens fire, killing many American soldiers. Smitty demonstrates great bravery by using the body of a dead soldier as a shield, and moving forward. On the other hand, someone else is so terrified that they cannot fight back. A Japanese soldier jumps on Smitty after only a few feet, and Doss saves him, earning his respect. Doss rushes to his comrade's aid bravely, without fear of being killed at any moment. He discovers a soldier who has lost his legs due to an explosion. A soldier advises Doss to let him die, because he is unlikely to survive. However, the protagonist does not intend to abandon a wounded comrade. As the soldiers advance, they notice that the main threat is the fortified bunkers. Smitty bravely advances alone once more, while a comrade covers him with a machine gun. A soldier throws a bomb at Smitty, who approaches the bunker and throws it inside. The American soldiers advance and achieve their first victory after the bunker's destruction. Both sides suffer significant losses during the initial fighting, and decide to call it a day to regroup. Sergeant Howell directs that everyone find a safe place to rest, and conceal their heads. Doss, on the other hand, goes to help the wounded on the battlefield, and Smitty joins him. Later, Doss and Smitty remain in the trench and get to know each other better. Smitty apologizes to Doss for being wrong about him. Doss tells Smitty that his fear of firearms stems from nearly shooting his father while drunk. Tom threatened the woman with a gun during an argument. Smitty claims that when he was 5 years old, his mother placed him in an orphanage. As a result, he learned to despise and judge a book by its cover. The Japanese launched a surprise attack the next morning. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers charged the American infantry, pushing them off the escarpment. Sergeant Glover orders artillery to strike directly at the soldiers' positions, forcing them to retreat. The enemy is heavily damaged, but Smitty sacrifices himself and is severely injured. Doss picks him up and carries him to safety, but Smitty dies from blood loss. Only Doss remains to mourn his fallen comrade in arms, as the soldiers begin to rappel down the escarpment. For a brief moment, he is perplexed as to why he is there. However, cries for help can be heard at one point. Doss dons his helmet and runs through artillery fire to help his comrades. Meanwhile, Sergeant Glover checks on the injured and does not find Doss, believing he has died. Doss, on the other hand, finds a survivor and drags him to the precipice. He ties one end of the rope to a tree, and wraps the other around the injured man. He then gradually lets go of the rope, lowering the injured man to the ground. Soldiers notice this maneuver and mistake it for a Japanese maneuver. However, they soon realize that a lunatic has remained up there, and attempt to rescue the survivors. Doss discovers one soldier who is still alive, but the Japanese eventually take control of the area. Doss covers him in the dirt, and hides him beneath a dead body. Doss continues walking as the enemy moves away, but he is soon spotted. He escapes the Japanese fire by entering a tunnel. He survives a grenade and escapes the Japanese soldiers. Das then finds a bleeding Japanese man, and saves him. Even as night falls, he continues to search for survivors. He resumes tying soldiers to the ground, while his comrades pick up the wounded and transport them to field hospitals. The protagonist discovers Sergeant Howell and another soldier from his unit injured in the morning. Das saves the soldier and returns to the sergeant, but is shot down by an enemy sniper. Then, despite being wounded, Howell locates and kills the sniper. Das starts dragging Howell to safety, while the sergeant shoots the enemies who are following them. Das then jumps down, carrying another wounded soldier from his unit in his arms. The Japanese go beyond the safe zone, and are killed as soon as they appear. Das is hero worshipped as he is led to the field hospital. The captain apologizes for having doubted him. He informs him that the next attack will take place tomorrow and invites him to join, even though it will be Saturday. The soldiers, in fact, do not want to go into battle without him. The following day, they all wait for Das to finish praying before launching the attack. The soldiers attack the Japanese furiously and advance without stopping. The enemy raises the white flag, but it is an ambush. Das manages to deflect 2 grenades thrown by a Japanese soldier but suffers a serious leg wound as a result. But the war is over, and the Japanese are well aware of it. They actually sacrifice themselves so that their commander can practice seppuku. It is a self-dismemberment ritual, even if it's not a good strategy. It is performed when a person feels tremendous shame as a result of a loss. He and his family would be honored again if he performed this act. Das steps off the cliff while clutching the small Bible Dorothy gave him. Later, we learn that Das is awarded the Medal of Honor by President Harry S. Truman for saving 75 soldiers at Hacksaw Ridge. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.